Hello and welcome to this video on the Fold 6 multi-topology wavefolder from Joranalogue. I'd like to thank Joranalogue for sponsoring this demo video. I'd like to start the video by quoting the website, which states, "Often considered to be the opposite of filters within a modular system, wavefolders are designed to fold a signal over itself multiple times, and this generates additional harmonics resulting in rich timbres." So Fold 6 is 4 HP with 2 inputs to mix your audio or sub-audio modulation signals. We have modulation over fold, modulation over shape, and that shape is a soft clipping circuit that adds further level boost and saturation and a lot of interesting additional harmonics on top of the folding. We can manually control symmetry, or we can modulate symmetry by using the second input, as that simply adds a voltage to the input to give us asymmetrical folding or clipping. As always, these videos are crammed full of as many synth tips and musical ideas as I can make them without them being ridiculously long, so the timing index is on screen. Do skip around as you see fit, ask questions in the comments, and without further ado, let's dive in. So let's check out the sound of Fold 6, with symmetry in the middle, no additional saturation from shape, a sine wave at the input and the main output. So it's a really lovely, smooth analog fold. Now shape is this nice soft saturation. Adding additional level, colour and character. Now with shape up, we can use this like a square wave PWM generator. Clipping off our sine, then adding some symmetry movement to mimic PWM. Let's check out the alternative out, which has a nice soft sound in comparison. So that's a sound on a sine wave. Let's get into some patches. So here is a parallel blend of a dry drum beat, which is this, and a distorted folded beat from Fold 6. And with this just fully wet in my mixer, just listening to Fold 6, we can add more distortion with the shape. Get a kind of spitty guitar pedal fuzz type sound that's asymmetrical. But let's find a nice sound. Oof. Let's blend that in parallel. It's really full on, but with all the clarity and transient and smack of that dry beat coming in, with my dry beat into my mixer and Fold 6 on another mixer channel. So here's a patch using both outs on Fold 6 into two separate low pass gates, which are then hard panned left and right, with a hell of a lot of modulation. Now I'll fully open these low pass gates, pull down this modulation, and we'll work back to the patch. So build this back up again, and again this is both outputs hard panned left and right. We'll start with the fold modulation from contour 1. Let's add that sine wave back into the second input. We could say take even output instead, which is saws. Nice rich sound. Modulate shape again. Now with all of this going into two separate low pass gates, I'll close those off. I have a ×2 clock and a ×4 clock hitting my low pass gates on both sides, and several divided down clocks and gates adjusting decay envelopes on those low pass gates and just opening them for short periods of time. So here I'm wavefolding LFOs, and specifically phase locked LFOs from the various outputs of my oscillating filter 8. By removing second inputs and modulation, we can see what that bit of folding has done to this normal oscillating sine wave. We get some very interesting shapes. But as all of the outputs are various phases of sine waves, so this is working like an octature LFO, anything I do to the folder from these signals will give me a phase-locked cycling pattern. So let's take another output and say modulate symmetry by going into that second input. Just turn down folding slightly and modulate the fold. Let's modulate shape with another one. So you may look at Fold 6 and wonder if you can modulate symmetry. We have inputs for fold and shape, two normal inputs, the input to the folding circuit, and our outputs, but no symmetry CV input. What symmetry does is add a voltage, in this case negative going left from centre, and positive going right from centre, to the input to push it asymmetrically into the folding, so it'll fold more on its positive or negative peak in the wave. The triangle wave is my input. I'm going to input an LFO, in this case an oscillating filter 8, into that second input, and the LFO will push this triangle into the positive and negative folding, and do the same as moving that knob. Adding a bit more folding. You can hear it's a lovely rich kind of PWM-like effect as it pushes positively and negatively into that folding. Now we can offset this modulation of symmetry on that second in with the knob still. Maybe up the rate slightly. So here I'm using Fold 6 like a character VCA, one that adds colour and tone, and there's some really lovely digital Yamaha DX style FM tones going on. This is simply a triangle wave coming in. You can hear there's some really interesting character and colour that's been added. Now the reason I can use Fold 6 like a character VCA, and removing this envelope, which is contour 1 being attenuated, the reason I can do this is because the fold will actually turn the sound off. The level is down completely. Starting to let that triangle through that starts to clip before it folds back on itself. Just as we've seen elsewhere in the video, there's a little bit of spring reverb going on, by the way. Just a nice background colour. Using this envelope though, to go from off, adding into this sounding and just coming up into the folding, we get all these lovely overtones, and that's why I'm thinking of this as a character VCA, or one colour tonal harmonic controlling VCA. Symmetry offers some nice tonal shifts. So here we'll look at audio rate modulation. My input is a triangle wave from Generate 3, and the sine wave from this oscillating filter 8, yellow trace there, is my modulator modulating the fold amount. This is coming into an external attenuator, so I'll slowly turn that up, changing the depth of this audio rate modulation. And you can hear some really cool tones, and it's all about tuning your modulator into something harmonious, a nice harmonic interval with the input of the folder. So let's play around with tuning. Let's play around with some other audio rate modulation, say of shape. So here's a patch showing why morphing wavetables and wavefolders are great kind of little love buddies. It's really interesting, and in this case, gritty tones. I have a wavetable oscillator with 3 triangle LFOs morphing it. That comes into Fold 6, and then on the input to modulate symmetry, fold and shape, I have 3 more free-running unsynced triangle LFOs. This comes into filter 8, which has its band and notch blend with another LFO, so 7 free-running triangle LFOs, modulating the cutoff on the filter. heavily modulating Fold 6, some interesting phaser-like movement from Filter 8, this really lovely gritty pairing of wavetables and wavefolding. So here's a very similar patch to earlier in the video where we looked at creating new unique cycling modulation by wavefolding these octature out of phase sine wave LFOs from Filter 8. Here though, I'm using free running triangle waves out of sync LFOs, 2 of them as inputs, and then 2 of them modulating fold and shape. Because all these ins are free running and out of sync, we'll get ever evolving, constantly varying, unique new modulation. And I'll just let you listen to it before we move on. So here's a patch with audio rate modulation of the folding, but the modulation is sequenced while my sound source to the input isn't. Contour 1 is modulating the shape, giving us this nice enveloped sound, but otherwise it's just droning away. But removing my fold modulation, which is a sine wave from an oscillating Filter 8, this is simply the sine wave from Generate 3 into Fold 6. You can hear there's no sequencing. Plugging in my audio rate modulation of Fold again and removing its sequencing, it's just tuned in to a nice harmonic ratio that gives me a nice audio rate modulation of wavefolding, but pitch modulating the modulator some really cool, interesting effects with that single droning bass note, sequenced modulation, and some enveloped shape control. Now here's my dry sound, which is Generate 3 with its even and odd harmonics modulated into Filter 8, which is under plenty of modulation too. This heavier 16th note pulsing is just in the distortion. It's a really interesting way to use Fold 6 as if it's just, say, a distortion pedal at the end of a patch, but to do so in parallel. So here we're wavefolding envelopes. Have a rather standard kind of ADSR. It's just been triggered by a clock. You see that rise, decay, so attack decay, some sustain, and a little bit of release. That's coming into Fold 6. And you can see its output's very different. So definitely throw some CV, including envelopes, into your folders. You find lots of new modulation shapes and sounds. So here's a stereo patch where an East Coast subtractive patch meets a West Coast style patch. Now these are currently in stereo because they're slightly panned left and right. Generate 3 is my oscillator, and its full output with all the harmonics that can generate goes into Filter 8 with some envelope modulating the filter, and that's my basic rich waves being subtractively filtered patch. And and then taking the core output, which is an octave lower, into Fold 6, modulating fold amount with a sequence, LFO to the second input for some symmetry modulation, and then I'm taking its output to a low pass gate, very West Coast in nature. Let's push those out a little bit wider in stereo. So that's it for this video on Fold 6 from Joranalogue. Be sure to check out other Joranalogue videos linked in the description. You can join my amazing growing community over at patreon.com/DivKid. Hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, all the usual stuff. And I'll see you next time. Cheers for watching.